It's a pleasure to be here. I think I was pleased to hear this morning that this is the energy city of Switzerland. I think that's the way I heard it. And actually, I think very interestingly, I was in Sao Paulo in June, and I heard the first presentation. I think it was by you actually as well. I think a very energetic and enthusiastic presentation about electromobilists. So I'm really looking forward this afternoon to visit and see it. So I think the other thing is you will get from me now a corporate perspective of the matter that we are talking about. So I think from my presentation, nothing about catalyst stability, selectivity, turnover rate, efficiency, what have you. I think it will be a corporate perspective. But I think, other than that, I think I'm pleased to see that, for instance, in the presentation of Andreas Sutel, that one of my colleagues was on the Metal Organic Framework papers, Hans Geerlings, and later on I think in the symposium that was announced he will be one of the speakers as well. So if you get the idea like Shell is only doing paper studies, scenarios and strategy, I think partly yes. I think we also have a lot of hands-on, foot on the ground work going on as well. And I hope I can convince you a little bit about our activity there. Okay, so I am the technology advisor in our long-range research and new energies technologies program. And I'm trying to give you
the other direction, Dan.
Other direction, okay. And I apologize for this slide, don't read it. I mean, I'm asked by my legal folks to show it, and the only thing it says is don't invest in Shell on the basis of the information that I'm going to give you today. So, I think the most important is that I think energy is a key enabler for our society. I think there are quotes here up, and I think saying like energy is something that actually makes a society, it's important for economic growth, it's important for welfare, it's important simply for our lives. And I think Shell, of course, I'm coming from a bit of a suspect background, given the fact that we are dealing with fossil hydrocarbons, which are one of the causes of a lot of discussion nowadays. But I think that our CEO is honestly and seriously expressing his views on the fact that he wants to be involved in the discussion around the energy transition, because I think that's what we're talking about nowadays. So being involved and also building, say, a bridge to parties that are active in this field. I mean, clearly Shell has a lot of experience on the one hand, exploration, production of hydrocarbons, converting hydrocarbons into products. But on the other hand, in renewables, the business models around renewables, the fundamentals around the PV, catalysis, etc. I think it is something that we don't have a track record and a background. So we are trying to learn, and our CEO is very supportive of that activity, and we are trying to reach out to parties in the world that actually understand this field as well, including the community like you're here today. So I think, what about Shell's role, and I think my voice is okay for the back of the audience as well, I don't have to stay very close to the mic, I hope. So I think Shell is playing already a role in the transition to a lower carbon world. I think it's partly driven by the fact that we are in a hydrocarbons business, but I think gas is considered to be, say, one of the lowest carbon emitting hydrocarbons. So Shell has been evolving away from an oil and gas company into a gas and oil company, and I think nowadays we are mainly a gas company with a bit of oil. So I think that's one of the drivers, but okay, again, I suspect background, of course, people say, yeah, you're just still in hydrocarbons. Yes, that's what we are, because we are a corporate, we are driven by economics of our business, and I think, yeah, we can't pull the plug today. I mean, that is basically the message. I think biofuels, we have been in biofuels, bioethanol with our joint venture in Brazil, Raisin, for quite some time now. And I think the other thing that you may have seen more recently in the public domain is that we also established now a new energy business, and I will talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes. So I think that's the business line which is up on the slide there. I think the middle line is more about what's going on in R&D and development. So Shell has been very active in carbon capturing and sequestration. We have been involved in pilot projects like in Canada, in Norway, and we tried to set up one in the UK as well. I mean, it's difficult because there is a lot of technology required. There is also a lot of not in my backyard kind of issues to be resolved with CCS. Then in the middle is the technologies development that I'm going to talk about in my second part of the presentation. And then we have something like we call our corporate venturing arm that is also looking into investments into clean energy solutions. So for instance, on the picture you see there a so-called wind power generated from kites, and the idea is high altitude wind is actually one of the technologies and one of the solutions that could be very interesting for wind energy generation, but clearly a far further out solution. Then I think on the bottom part of the picture is, it's all about advocacy, being part of platforms, talking, influencing, etc., etc. So I think our gas advocacy, our CO2 pricing, that we have to be very vocal about, that the price of CO2 has to go up in order to actually realize breakthroughs and developments in this field. And I think our scenarios is a very well-known kind of activity that comes out every 2 years, and it is very well acknowledged by most of the people that are involved in it. So just a very brief picture on where is Shell actually, because I think in the middle part I said, okay, technology, and I think I will talk more about technology today than about, say, advocacy or the business side of things. So we have like 3 major hubs in research hubs in Shell. So one is in Houston in the US, one in the Netherlands in Amsterdam, where I'm based myself, and then one in India in Bangalore. And then we have, say, a few, call it sites, market and regional services, as they call it, that also support our R&D. So I think we are globally present. Okay, now a few words about, and I think we heard this morning already a few times, like, we will see a growth of renewables. Renewables will grow very quickly. It will replace fossil hydrocarbons, and yes, this is going on. But there is a few, call it, issues with the energy transition. And I think what I'm trying to picture here is, first of all, the makeup of primary energy sources is today mainly oil and gas and coal. I mean, that's a given, and we don't like it, but I mean, that's what it is. On the other hand, the areas where actually the greenhouse gas emissions are occurring are also spread out. I mean, transport, industry, agricultural, and then electricity and heat production. These are the main 4 sectors where CO2 emissions are actually occurring. So this is a broad spectrum of both feedstock on the one hand, and the given infrastructure, and all the investments that have been made into that, and the economic lifetime of all these assets. And on the other hand, the use and the mitigation measures that have to be taken in order to get these CO2 emissions down from these sectors. But that is the current situation. But I think there is also something else. And I mean, that the world is changing. I mean, there is aspects around growing population. I mean, there is aspects around rising demand. There is aspects around ongoing supply. I think in Andreas' presentation he showed, like, maybe aeroplanes will still rely for a long time on liquid hydrocarbons. It's difficult to envisage that you have there hydrogen or batteries, for instance. It's not impossible, but I mean, it's a challenge. And then I think mitigating climate change as well. So all these things actually drive energy demand, say between now and 2050. There will be an enormous increase in energy demand. So I agree with the fact that renewable energy will grow fast. There will be a large part of the growth of energy production, but the overall energy demand will grow even faster, which brings to the forefront that oil and gas cannot be phased out from day one, assuming that renewable energy will all take it over, unless you accept the fact that you switch off certain economies by saying, okay, you're not allowed to grow, you're not allowed to grow your GDP, you're not allowed to use more energy, because GDP growth and energy use, I mean, are most of the time going one on one together. Okay, then a few words about, say, decarbonization. I think it's also, and I don't know why, this is now shifted from the, is this actually the first slide that actually is off, or one more of them? Okay. I think the message here is green is less difficult to decarbonize. Orange is like in the middle where it's more difficult to decarbonize. And I mentioned already there is different parts of industry where actually decarbonization is required. And if you look, for instance, at power generation, it says in general it's green, so it's less difficult to decarbonize. I think the answer is yes. Technically, it's possible. I mean, capturing CO2 with amine washing from point sources, I mean, is a technology that is out there. But on the other hand, it's also costly, and it also, again, consumes energy. So although it can be done technically, yes, but I mean, it has a penalty as well. Transport, I mean, the picture on the right is an aeroplane. I mentioned that already. It's more difficult to decarbonize, and I think built environment, yes, can be done, though requires investments. And the industry, I think, is a bit of a mixed bag. So I think it shows you a little bit that it's not that easy by saying, okay, we have renewables, let's just pump renewables into the system, let's forget about hydrocarbons, and that's it, we have solved the problem. It's more complicated. Okay, then talking about Shell and the new energy business. So I said already, like, our CEO is very vocal about the fact that he wants to be involved in the energy transition. And we have a serious effort currently going on. I think we have something like, I don't know exactly, 400, 500 people in Shell working in the area around new energy. So I think it's not like two people in the lab and somebody doing a paper study in business development and see what it all is now. I think it's really quite serious. I think the new energy business was launched in July last year. You may have seen, for instance, maybe the announcement last week about our investment in New Motion, which is the company in the Netherlands that is very active Europe-wide in charge poles for electric mobility. And I think this is one of the activities where we also show face other than just having a new energy business somewhere people sitting behind a desk. I think the area where this new energy business is active is partly in new fuels, it's partly in integrated energy solutions, and it's partly in so-called connected customers. So fuels, I mean, we started off from the biofuels and we will move, for instance, into hydrogen. I think we are known for being involved in the hydrogen mobility program in Germany, rolling out retail stations. But as said, I mean, the investment in New Motion also shows that we are also, say, betting on both electric mobility and hydrogen. I think it's not a done deal that hydrogen is the end game, at least say for every solution and application in a certain market. I think, yeah, new fuels, that's one, and integrated energy solutions, particularly solar and wind. I think wind, integrating wind parks and solar with power trading. In the US, Shell is the biggest power trader and also has the biggest amount of assets on the ground for power generation, though it's all captive power generation. So all the electricity that is being produced is actually going into our refinery operations. So we are not linked to customers in terms of trying to leverage our knowledge and experience there and trying to bring that to integrated energy solutions, and at the end of the day also to connected customers is another element of focus of this new energy business that has been set up. Okay, then I'd like to make a switch in my presentation from, on the one hand, say the new energy business and the policy that Shell actually is going through, the discussions, the strategy, and on the other hand, the research and development that we are doing in this field. I think this picture shows you on the one hand, so the options that you have to go in this field is on the one hand, which is the y-axis, it's like progress through coordination and regulatory drive. And so a lot of that is actually around, for instance, carbon capture and sequestration. It's around hydrogen already. It's about cities. It's about bioenergy, so the biofuels mandate, for instance, in Europe. So that is something, although there is technology required, I mean, the main driver is policy and regulatory. But I think on the other hand, getting more and more renewable energy from PV and from wind, for instance, in the mix, also is requiring breakthrough technologies. I mean, that is the technology development we heard about a little bit in the previous two presentations. I think all of this and what will follow in my presentation is part of that, these two red boxes that are up there. I think, and it's on the one hand, if you produce renewable electricity or power, I mean, it's intermittent, so at a certain moment you need to store it, and your storage option is either in a battery, because electricity is best used as electricity, so you store it and you get it out as electricity. But at a certain moment, the volumes and the capacity that you have do not allow battery storage any longer, and I think then you have to convert it into something else that either can be transported easily or can be stored easily, and that most of the times is molecules. And that is also where Shell's business is where we are back to our business, so to say. I mean, we are not very good in electrons, I think we are relatively good in molecules. So that's where this solar fuels aspect comes in. So in Shell, we have set up since last year a so-called long-range research program. I think it was advocated in the beginning as back to basics and fundamental R&D. In my view, it's a little bit of a misnomer in the sense that this has the tendency to be read as, okay, ivory tower, people go in research and they come back 30 years later and say we have something. I think it's very important to realize that we are very closely linked to that new energy business. So I think anything that comes out of that research needs to have an outlet, hopefully, in what Shell tries to achieve in this development and in this energy transition. So our philosophy is try to develop a radically better energy carrier, but I think the premise there is that we want to use low-cost solar energy in the form of PV or wind, and also use that or combine that with novel technologies for energy storage on the one hand and conversion, like we heard in the previous presentation, using CO2 and converting that into what we call dense energy carriers. And then there is a lot of enabling technologies, of which one important one is electrochemistry, where there are not many people in Shell that have a background in electrochemistry. And that's also in the title of my talk, the word together. I mean, it's really like, okay, how can you reach out and try to set up collaborations with the outside world in that field? And I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so this is a very busy slide, and I don't ask you to read it all. I think this is just showing you that we have like 3 programs in Shell now in this long-range research area. I mean, one around dense energy carriers, one around advanced energy storage, and the other one that I'm not going to talk about too much today is methane to products. So let me briefly explain. Methane to products is really like direct activation of methane. So oxidative coupling of methane has been one of the fields of R&D. But here we're also thinking about, say, can you do electrochemical conversion of CH4 into products? So we want to go away of using CH4 for the heating value, but actually using CH4 for its molecular value and the added value once you make all the molecules directly out of that. So with the rest of my talk will mainly be on advanced energy storage and dense energy carriers. So the dense energy carriers, I think the pre-assumption is for dense energy carriers, which mainly says, okay, can we make renewable hydrocarbons that are actually competitive to nowadays fossil hydrocarbons? I think that is basically the challenge out there. So the first assumption is that you have very cheap solar energy. And the second assumption is that there is, say, affordable, effective and large-scale hydrogen generation technology. And so basically you end up in electrolysis being one of the technologies that is coming to the front foremost. And then I think the other element is CO2. So you need to convert CO2, and I think it was presented in in the previous presentation, you could use point sources for CO2 capture and then convert the CO2 into a product. Yes, but on the other hand, I mean, you avoid the CO2 coming into the atmosphere with one cycle, but at the end of the day, it ends up there as well. So I think the holy grail, but also a big challenge, would be like, can we do longer-term CO2 capture from air? And then of course, then we are talking about novel routes to syngas and hydrocarbon fuel synthesis. So the easiest one is produce hydrogen from renewable electricity, have CO2, go to a reverse water gas shift, and then do a Fischer-Tropsch, and you end up with a dense energy carrier. Clearly, I mean, there is also direct routes that I will talk about. And then some people talk about artificial photosynthesis, which I really call something like far out interesting, but a really big challenge. I think in advanced energy storage, and I'll explain in one of my next slides why Shell is actually involved in battery research and advanced energy storage. But the field here is not so much around improving lithium-ion technology that is out there together with the car manufacturers. I mean, the lithium-ion technology is there, and I think Shell cannot contribute to anything like that. It's more like keeping a radar screen on what is going on, and also like, so what is beyond lithium-ion? So what about lithium air, lithium sulfur, sodium-ion, multivalent? I think these are the kind of areas where our radar screen and focus of activity is on. Okay, I think just an illustration of and I think most of the people may have seen this. I mean, PV is coming down the cost curve very quickly. I think these are one of the, I call it the bells and whistles in our own organization when we observe this, that we see, okay, solar PV was thought about 10 years ago like, very far out, and I think you currently see bids which are in the order of about 30 cents per megawatt hour. Of course, clearly depending on where you are on the latitude, but again, the technology is out there and is able to generate electricity at impressively low cost and going down the cost curve still. So I think the assumption then that you have these very cheap electrons made from photons, I think there's a bit of this picture that says, okay, if you think, and this is an illustration around this dense energy carriers concept. So I think the end use of all the energy carriers that we have, either being it photons or electrons or hydrogen or at the very end dense energy carriers, clearly on the one hand there is something which is the highest energy utilization. Again, I mentioned already, if you have an electron, you store it in a battery and use it as an electron, you avoid a lot of the conversion and efficiency losses. On the other hand, I mean, electricity is difficult to store, to transport, so I think if you have a dense energy carrier where you have high product utility, but it needs all these conversion steps. So I think at the end of the day you will go through a sequence of efficiency losses. So I think in an illustration where the focus of our dense energy carrier program is, we consider electrolysis to be the backbone of this dense energy carriers development. I think this is showing you the picture, which is probably known to many of you. If you have these cheap electrons, so we are assuming here for our internal economics, like we have to go down to 10 to 20 dollars per megawatt hour, which is still below where we are today. And I think then by water electrolysis you can go to hydrogen, but clearly I think there are other carriers as well. I mean, nitrogen brings you to an ammonia kind of economy or energy landscape, and then atmospheric CO2 conversion brings you to either simpler hydrocarbons like methanol, or brings you to the more complicated, challenging hydrocarbon fuels that are up there on the right. I think it's important to realize that at the end of the day people talk about let's go hydrogen, let's forget about CO2. But mind that at the end of the day a lot of our infrastructure and environment around us actually still needs a lot of carbon or anything else as well, because hydrogen for chemicals and products needs to be linked to a backbone, which 9 out of 10 times is a carbon molecule. So I think that's also important to realize. This is just an alternative. I mean, you could say instead of going from electrons to hydrogen via electrolysis and then combining with chemical processes and catalysis the hydrogen and CO2 or any other backbone to high-value molecules. So you can also imagine that you actually go directly, which is called the so-called co-electrolysis, where CO2, for instance, and water are being electrolyzed, forming syngas or any other mixture of products. And I think there we have seen in all our collaborations, I think there is a lot going on in this field. Catalysts are being developed like we just heard, but I think most important is that the selectivity of these processes is extremely important, and also understanding, say, what are the limiting factors and the cost at the end of the day if we would like to do this at scale. Okay, then let me quickly go. I think I have like 2 more minutes. I think I'll just make it. I think advanced energy storage, I mentioned already, like, yeah, the radar and keeping an eye on what's going on and developing beyond lithium ion. So like the solar PV curve, I think we also observe for lithium ion that this is really going down the cost curve. And interestingly enough, I mean, it's actually being parallel to the solar PV curve. So why is Shell involved then in this energy storage technology? I think the raccoon plot that you see up there, I mean, has been shown by many, many people. It's showing you that batteries are actually straddling a large part of both the power and energy that is required over certain areas of time. And interestingly, hydrogen is filling, on the one hand, an area which is called decentralized hydrogen, which is I would call the mobility kind of sector, whereas the other hydrogen bubble on the right is really like hydrogen as an energy vector and storing hydrogen at a very large scale. So the interaction between our dense energy carriers program on the one hand and on the other hand our advanced energy storage program is really like finding out where are the niches and where are the business opportunities for the one, hydrogen, and the other stationary and mobile energy storage. Okay, then my last slide is, and I think this is again about the word together. I mean, if we talk about energy transition, again I mentioned already that Shell doesn't have all the wisdom in-house, particularly not in this field. So we are reaching out to the world. We currently have collaborations, and I think these are the ones that are very public. So we had a couple of proposals with Berkeley, for instance, earlier in the year. We are setting up a new energy research center in Brazil. We have collaborations both in the UK, in the Netherlands, in India and China. But other than that, I think we also have like more under the radar screen collaborations going on, even with people being here in the room. So I would say here, the business element is one. I think Shell is driven by business, but on the other hand, the fundamental R&D, we are trying to reach out to folks like you in order to do things together. Thank you very much.